Hola, hola. This is your boy Tico, Tren, SYSBM, and Red Pill. And this video is going to be about, this podcast is going to be about um, the ignorance in America, the rise of ignorance, basically, in the Western world, for all intents and purposes. The sad part about that is something I've always found funny, or something I've always noticed, is the rise of stupidity in people when they say stupid shit. And the sad part about that, Yam rebought this back to my attention. I was supposed to do a video on it, but I forgot all about it. But Yam brought this back to my attention in a live stream that I was doing. The funny thing about that live stream is it had it had about it had a decent amount of people in the live stream for all intents and purposes. But the problem with the actual live stream was the stupidity of a person in the live stream that actually made it so that it was like, okay, this guy's dumber than a box of rocks, pretty much. Was my actual thoughts on the whole entire thing, and the guy that he was dumber than a box of rocks, obviously. And the sad part about that is, what I mean by that is, this guy literally said the most dumbest shit in the whole entire world and thought it was okay to say the dumbest shit in the whole entire world. This nigga said, and I quote, if you can't control the women, if you can't get women in your own habitat or your own country, you don't get any women anywhere else in the world. That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard as a human being. The dumbest shit I've ever heard as a human being. Because for one, the problem with that statement is, one, he was dumber than a box of rocks. Two, he very rarely travels. And three, he tries to prop up like a couple places that he went to as him being a world traveler, when in fact I look at traveling like this. If you haven't either done one or two of these things or took one or two of these paths, when it comes down to it, and the one or two paths are: path one, if you haven't if you haven't traveled to if you don't have a full book, if you don't have a full or a half a book of stamps, or you don't have to carry multiple passports to actually travel, shut the fuck up. And the second one is, if you haven't traveled to a country and stayed for a long period of time, longer than a couple weeks, like at least 6 months to a year, shut the fuck up. That's typically how I feel. Like, if you don't get multiple stamps, if you can't tell me you get multiple stamps in more than 1 month, or more than a several, if you don't get multiple stamps, period, and you barely travel, you're not a traveler. If you travel like twice a year, you're not a fucking traveler. If you travel twice a year but you stay for 6 months or more, then yes, you are a traveler. And you also are a person that can adapt to very many different situations, especially if you're staying for 6 months or more. But if you just travel like, twice a year, three times a year, and you only stay for like a week, a couple days, you're, yeah, no, shut up. Shut up. When it comes to travel, because the sad part about that is, I've been to places that I've stayed more than 6 months. I've been to places that I've been to places and I filled up books and stamps. I filled up passport books off the bat. So I'm gonna need motherfuckers to miss me with that bullshit. It's only traveled to a couple countries. Talk about, if you can't make it in your own country, you'll never make it anywhere in another country. Or, if you can't get a girl in your own country, you can't get a girl anywhere. And this is the problem with narrow-minded. This is the problem with narrow-mindedness in the Western world. And I like to thank Yam for reminding me to do this video, because I've been meaning to do this video for a long time, and Yam just recently reminded me about this video when he sent me a link to a video. I'm like, oh shit, these motherfuckers again. So I would like to thank Yam for this one, for reminding me to do this lovely podcast. The problem is, what I'm going to address today is, basically, I'm address I'm addressing ignorance and projection, travel idiocy, closed mindedness, no two cultures are the same, be yourself, res- be yourself, respect the culture, and know your limitations. This is what I'm going to address in this lovely podcast today. As you see, the lovely thumbnail is basically, there's I meant to use another one, but this one was much better for the fact that it doesn't get the chains on it, which means it signifies Yeah, this one signifies freedom and reaching for the sky for all intents and purposes, and never letting nobody limit you to where you need to go or where you want to do in your life. So the thumbnail basically has everything to do with this lovely thing. This is not just a black man. This is basically all men. Trust me. If you let go of your chains, if you take off your fucking chains, you can travel anywhere and do anything and be anything you want to be in life for all intents and purposes. That's what this live stream's all about for all intents and purposes. Not this stupid shit. What's up, Sigma? That's what's up. That is what's up. That is what's up. What's up, Seeker? And what's up, yeah, what's up, Seeker? And what's up, Baron Yam, for stopping in earlier and not coming back? 4 years of Madrid. That's motherfucking what's up right there. 4 years of Madrid. You did that. I tip my hat to you because they got some shit going on over there right now. They probably was fine before that, but they got some shit. They got some shit in their shit now, typically. But yeah. But what I'm going to address today is the stupidity and narrow-mindedness of people who think like this guy. The problem with people who think like this guy, they think that they travel a couple places, they know every place, and they think they know about travel. Like, no, nigga, first off, if you ain't been to no country where they don't speak English, I'm gonna need you to shut the fuck up. Like, legit. Yeah, like, legit. If you haven't been to a country where they don't speak English, I'm gonna need you to shut the fuck up. Let's just keep it 100. If you've been to a country where you didn't have to work or have to do any damn work or didn't have to learn the culture a little bit or the language a little bit to get around, nigga, shut the fuck up. Like, let's just keep it 100. Like, it's just shit like this that just blows my mind when you hear goofy men speak about stupid shit on shit that they really don't know nothing about. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, the problem with stupid people like this is, one, they're projecting, and two, they're ignorant. So they're projecting, and they're both projecting, and they're both ignorant. So they're basically projecting off of their experiences within those countries. This is typically the problem that a lot of people have. Because I look at it like this: if you're going to come in my live stream talking about like you've been to these two places and you suck at what you do, you probably you're 9 times out of 10 you're projecting. And like Seeker said, living and visiting are two totally different things. Most definitely, I agree. If you visited the place multiple times, that is, like, I mean, like, more than like 3-4 times, if you visit it on a regular basis, you're more likely a local. You're more likely to be seen as a local. Vienna, 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 Sigma. Uh, but but yeah, it's one of those things. It's one of those things where like you have to basically go and actually experience the actual culture, not go over there and like do the touristy shit. Like a good example of that, a good example of a real traveler who goes and visits places is one master teacher. He is the problem with him. The thing about not one master teacher. I'm sorry, wrong person. A good example of people who actually go and visit countries and they go to the actual country, not the touristy spots, are those people who like tend to travel, but they go to like the heart of like the country instead of the touristy spots. The parts of the country where they tell you never travel to, or you know you might want to watch yourself, or it's dangerous over there. These are typically those people who are actually avid travelers who actually know the layout of the land, and actually commend those people and tip my hat to those people. These are people who literally visit other countries and stay in the middle of the hood, basically, or stay in the dangerous areas and don't stay on the resorts. That's typically the people who goes and visits other countries who actually tip my hat to. Because there's a lot of motherfuckers that go, well, Tico, I went to Jamaica and I feel like I'm one of you now. No, you're not. You went to a resort, bitch. You're not one of us now. You went to a resort. And this is typically what I mean by that. Like, if you're going to go to Jamaica, go into Jamaica and actually go to a hotel or motel in Jamaica where a Jamaican would actually stay, not some place where a Jamaican can't actually afford. stay at some place where a Jamaican would actually stay if some shit went bad, some shit went south in his hometown for all intents and purposes, or they had a storm or they had a hurricane or something like that and it destroyed part of the island. This is typically the hotels that they would normally stay in. Don't be telling me about some sandals or some beaches shit. That's not staying in Jamaica. The fact of the matter is, you attempted to learn, so that's all that matters. You mean you pretty much had to learn just so you can get around Ecuador, so that's all that matters. Like there's people that'll sit there and be lost for like weeks, days, months, and shit like that, and won't learn a lick of Spanish basically, and hope somebody speaks English to them. Those are the people. Those are the people that I'm addressing in this video. The people who walk around expecting somebody to be able to speak English, or hoping and praying somebody speaks English, that travel to those countries. And it's just shit like that I'm talking about. But the sad part about that is, yeah, the sad part about that is, yeah, that's actually a nice place to actually live. Yeah, that's typically how it is with Spanish. Like you tend to speak it when there's no choice. That's typically how I actually roll. I only speak it when there's no choice, when I don't have a choice, like when my grandmother calls. It's like, oh fuck. It's like I mean, oh fuck, I gotta speak it. I mean, oh fuck, she's calling shit. Now I gotta speak to this woman. She got some shit to say. But yeah, typically you run into people who say stupid shit like that to you, and it just blows your mind, and it makes you shake your head because you know that this motherfucker doesn't have any experience in traveling along the lines of that. What's up, Americus? Seeker and Americus in a house at the same damn time. That's what's up. But yeah, it's one of those things where like you run into those problems. You run into those problems with people who will say the dumbest shit in the world. And typically what I mean by that is the people who will say dumb shit like what I was saying before, and the people that will say shit like, that they know about traveling when they only got like a couple stamps in their books over a 10-year period of your fucking travel. I mean, it's one thing if you lived in that country for 6 months or 4 to 6 months or something along the lines of that, then I'll let you have a pass. Yeah, I know the double do. All you need is Shinobi one in here. It'd be the trio. It'd be the trio. He has Shinobi one in here. No, but yeah, it's one of those things where like when you if you traveled outside the country, you stayed for like 4 to 6 months. I tip my hat to you. You actually did some actual traveling. You actually went into the actual country and you actually did your actual homework and shit like that. However, if you just went there for a couple weeks, then I'm gonna laugh at your ass and just keep it moving. Especially if you stayed on a resort. Another thing about that is people like I said about if you only got a couple stamps in your book, but you stayed in those countries for X amount of time, you're fine. You're not. This is not the people I'm talking about in this video. If you've traveled all over the world and you had to travel with like multiple passports because you fill up that bitch up so fast and so quick, this video is not for you because you pretty much travel quite often. However, I do know people that travel and will travel through another country on purpose to either get a cheaper flight and to get an extra stamp in their book for all intents and purposes so they can say they've been places. I do know some motherfuckers that do that shit quite often. They'll travel through multiple countries at one time on a flight, basically, and have multiple layovers or multiple different stops just so they can have a bunch of different stamps in their book. I know a lot of motherfuckers who do that shit, especially a lot of Americans that do that shit. But yeah, it's stuff like that that just blows my mind when it comes down to it. Another thing about those types of people is when they say that stupid shit like, well, if you can't get a girl in your country, if you can't control a girl in your habitat or your country, you can't get a girl anywhere else in the world. Okay, yeah, this explains why a large majority of white men travel to Asia and get married to Asian women, what they refer to as the leftover women in Asia. I mean, leftover women in Asia aren't bad looking. They're just leftover women in Asia for the fact that they've either been married or they went past a certain they went past a certain age and nobody really wants to talk to them. That's simply all it really is in Asia. Like the sad part about that is there's a lot of women in Asia. There's a lot of people and there's a lot of women in Asia who are single right now, despite the fact that the male to woman population is greater in Asia, I mean in China than anywhere else. The sad part about that is there's a lot of leftover women in China for this reason. And the sad part about it, what that means is there's a lot of women that were married and divorced. There's a lot of women that were that never got married or never settled down, so they're single. And there's a lot of women in the Oriental culture, Asian culture, basically, that are stuck like Chuck like that. And the sad part about that is they're only saving grace as white men that's willing to travel to Asia and date them and marry them for this reason. And the sad part about that, there's a shit ton of white men that travel to Asia to do this. I've always found it funny how that works because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, these men will strike out in their own country, then they'll travel to China and hit the jackpot for all intents and purposes. Matter of fact, I can think of two YouTubers off the top of my head. One does tech, one does traveling and tech, one does travel and uh, tech reviews, and the other one basically just lives there and just does a travel channel or traveling around China for all intents and purposes. But one does tech and travel. And the sad part about that is they're both white guys. And the sad part about that is they both went to China and they both met a woman in China and they're both married to Chinese women. The one's not that good looking, so he would have struck out in America, but he got a Chinese wife that looks better than a lot of the women in America, despite the fact that she was actually married at one point and she got a divorce. She was able to refine love in a white man for all intents and purposes. This is typically how this shit works. So that goes out the window for, you can't get a girl in your own country. The other guy, I think he could have got a girl in his own country. He didn't strike me as somebody who couldn't get a girl. What's up, what's up, what's up, blind assassin? I'm doing a table flip later today. So don't be sure to check your Discord, pimpin'. What's up, Sigma? I already said what's up, Sigma. What's up, Black Pill Radio? What's up, blind assassin again? But typically the problem with a lot of these people, I'm moving to Wakanda. Okay. If you find it, let my black ass know so I can move too. Shit. I'm moving to Wakanda. I'm moving to Wakanda. He's a trip. But the problem with a lot of these people that says the stuff that they do is they typically don't really know anything about what they're saying, or they got a baseline for something that they got a baseline for a country that they only been in for a couple weeks or a couple days basically, and they basically struck out. This is how you know people are projecting, because the sad part about that, when it comes down to it, just because you live in America and you can get a girl in America, that don't mean you can get a girl in the UK or Canada. Or the sad part about that, it's actually much harder to get a girl in Canada than it is in the United States. Let's just keep it 100. It's much harder to get a girl. If you're from the United States, it's much harder to get a girl from Great Britain than it is to get a girl in the United States. I'm just keeping it 100. The same thing goes for Australia. Despite the fact that them bitches are feminist, they're more likely to end up with a guy from abroad than they are a guy that actually lives there. So it's actually much easier to actually get a girl. If you're from, the sad part about this, it's much easier to get a girl in Australia than anywhere else. That's the cold hard truth. And the thing that makes it so complicated, and the thing that makes it so funny is there's a lot of people that will sit up here and say, well, Tico this and Tico that. Like, no, nigga, I never had those problems. I never had a problem with women traveling for all intents and purposes. And that's typically how that works. Like I've never had a problem with women while I was traveling. That's something that you have a problem with that you need to work on. And that's simply how I feel about a lot of that a lot of the times. Because there's a lot of people that will sit up here and say, well, Tico this and you you're being mean or something along the lines of that. When in fact I'm not being mean. I'm keeping it 100. Like no, that's your problem that you need to work on. That that that's your problem that you need to work on basically to make it so that it can work for you. Because there's a lot of people that will sit up here and say, well, Tico this and Tico that. Like, no, nigga, that's your problem. That is your problem. But the sad part about that is there's a lot of people. Oh, Sigma, don't forget to show up later too for table flip if you want to join table flip. It's all about fun. It's basically going to be an after party type thing, atmosphere. So if you want in, let me know basically, and I'll just send you a link for all intents purposes, and you can jump in. Um, but yeah, back to the lecture at hand. The sad part about that is you'll run into a lot of people that will say the dumbest shit to you, that who barely travel or very rarely travel or barely leaves their own county or country for all intents purposes, but they're always trying to make it so that they're trying to make it sound like they know about traveling when in fact they know very little about traveling. It's typically how it works. Like, wow, interesting. No obesity, no obesity, no obesity at all. Oh wow, interesting. I gotta definitely. That's what's up. But the sad part about that is when you actually start traveling, you actually start seeing the world. You tend to get a different view of the world for all intents and purposes, especially if you're black. You tend to learn different things about your country that you normally wouldn't learn about while you're drinking because you were too busy drinking a Kool-Aid in your country. So you tend to learn more about your country outside of your country, all about your country, that country of origin for all intents and purposes. Because for the fact that if you're black, you tend to find out very quick. If you're African American, you tend to find out very quickly that depending on what country you go to, you're welcome with open arms. Some countries, not so much, but most countries, they tend to welcome you with open arms. The sad part about that is you're more likely to be treated like shit in your own country than you are in countries outside of your country. That being said, like a good example of that is we always talk about the whole entire African American thing. The funny thing about Africa and African Americans is that might be true if they travel to the United States, but if you actually travel to Africa and stay there for a while, you actually get more respect from them than you would being an African American that never left this country or never left this township or never left this zip code. It's stuff like that I've always found funny. What's up, Billy Goat? Billy the Goat. Uh, it's stuff like that I've always found funny when it comes down to it. It's like one of those things where it's like, well, you kind of had it coming. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah. And another funny thing about people who travel that don't travel that often, that always try to make it sound like they travel everywhere, is they're the fact that they actually admit they're actually projecting their experiences for everybody else. So if you hear somebody that don't really travel that often or travel to a couple places and now they're trying to actually be travel experts, they're projecting. 10 out of 10 times they're projecting. And that's simply how that works. And there's a lot of men that do this shit on a regular basis and want to pretend like, like they know how to travel or they've been world travelers and shit along the lines of that, when in fact they're really not. They're really not in the least bit world travelers. And what I mean by that is you'll run into people that'll do that shit and talk about how much they travel and this, that, and the other, and this, that, and the other. Meanwhile they don't even travel. It's one of those funny things that if you've ever noticed that people always run into or get themselves into, and it's pretty funny how that works when people actually run into that problem and don't seem to understand why they're running into these problems for all intents and purposes. And it's one of those things where like you have to question the source all the damn time when it happens. You definitely have to question the source. Um, MGTOW Threads is a nut. What's up, MGTOW Threads? But it's one of those things where, as a male and as a human being, you have to realize is going on, and you have to realize what your worth is, and you have to be willing to actually travel and experience the world for all it's worth and what it has to offer you for all intents and purposes. Because there's a lot of people that'll swear up and down they travel all the time. They only got like a couple stamps in their book. Or there's a lot of people that'll swear up and down that they do this, that, and the other, and they really don't. Like another thing that this dumb motherfucker said in my last stream was was that yeah, basically, like, you can't get a girl if you can't get a girl in your own country or your own habitat, you'll never get a girl anywhere else in the world. Like I said, I basically debunked that with the two white guys who traveled to China. Who pretty much, the two white guys who traveled to China basically and got a girl. The other one looks like the one Doctor Who with the curly black hair, but a little less attractive than that guy. What's his name? Matt something. I can't remember his name. Is it Matt? Yeah, I can't remember. It looked like that Doctor Who basically with the curly hair, and he looks like he's less attractive than that guy. If you can actually get a picture of who that is as Doctor Who. And the sad part about that is he still got married to a woman in China. Granted, she was a leftover woman in China. He still got married to a woman in China. And he lives in China. So you can't say, well, maybe she wanted to come back to America. No, they live in China. They live in China. He kept her ass in China. So that's one smart thing that white guy did do, is keep her ass in China. It's simply how that works. And the sad part about that is when it comes down to it, that's the opposite. What's the opposite? And the sad part about that is you run into many people from many different countries. Like a good example, there's a guy who's actually a content creator, SYSBM content creator. He's actually married to and has multiple children with a Indian woman. He currently lives in India. Now, if you know anything about black people in India, they tend to not really see eye to eye, and they tend to not really see each other as equal. Well, no, I should say more so the Indians don't see black people as equal. But to actually get an Indian woman, that's actually an accomplishment and a half within itself. To be honest with you, to actually get it for a black man to get an Indian woman, that would be like hitting the lottery, or hitting a Powerball, or being a billionaire for all intents and purposes, is the best way I can describe it to you. What's up, no sweetheart? That's typically how that works. If a black guy can pull an Indian woman, he done pretty much hit the pinnacle of his fucking life for all intents and purposes. Because a black guy and an Indian woman together is very, very rare. I mean, it's very, very rare, but it happens. It's been happening a lot lately. It's been a phenomenon. Me being one of those people. So if you're a black, you get an Indian woman. That's pretty much the pinnacle that you can possibly reach. That's pretty much the top of the mountain that you could. That's pretty much the highest peak and the highest mountain that you could reach as a black man if you can actually get an Indian woman. It's just facts. And what I mean by that is because of the cultures, even though the cultures were close at one point in time, like they fell out basically, and now they're like, ew. Basically, it's like ew. And it's like one of those things. Even if you're damn near rich, you could be damn near rich, and an Indian woman would skip over you. If you're black and if you're black, an Indian woman will skip over you if you're black. If you're rich, that's simply how a lot of this shit works. And the sad part about that is, you literally got to be something special to actually pull an Indian woman. First off, secondly, there's a lot of black men within SYSBM who actually are dating Indian women, which is another shocker for a lot of people. Dating an Arab woman, that's really not that hard. There's a lot of those going around. Everybody's dating an Arab woman. Hell, white people dating an Arab woman, Chinese people dating an Arab woman, Arab men dating Arab women, black men dating Arab women. That's pretty much not that hard to do. The same thing goes for Asian women. That's happening so often, it's ridiculous. So, like, for a black man's pinnacle in his dating prowess is to be able to date an Indian woman. Because that shit is hard. Ask Mr. Forma. Like that's not some shit that you'll see on a regular basis. So if an Indian woman is actually interested in you, there's something special about you to make that Indian woman interested in you. Because that's the hardest thing. That's the highest peak you could possibly reach for as a black man in this dating market. White women are easy, Asian women are easy, Arab women are easy, black women are easy. You know, Latinas are easy. I mean, that's pretty much easy comparative to an Indian woman, to be honest with you. So if you're a black man dating an Indian woman, you pretty much made it to your pinnacle, for all intents and purposes. Um, that's pretty much a black man's pinnacle for what he could possibly date, what he could possibly date and get into, for all intents and purposes. Like when people say, "Well, he dates a white girl." Well, nah, that's easy. Everybody's dating a white girl. Shit, hell, Kanye West is dating a white girl. Everybody, half the NBA's roster is dating white women. The non-white ones are dating white women. Let's just keep it 100. So that's not hard to do. That's not hard to do in the least bit. And like Snow Sweetheart said, basically it's the caste system. Now, the caste system that got them all fucked up. Before the whole entire caste system, everything was perfectly fine. Everything was perfectly okay and everything was perfectly fine. After the caste system, it's a whole nother fucking story. And Tico's trying to say that female is female. Basically, yeah, female is female. A female is a female is a female. It's all about culture and how much you respect the culture for all intents and purposes. If you're disrespectful to the culture, there's a high chance that you're not going to make it in that culture, and you might end up missing. You might come up missing, to be honest with you, because I know a lot of motherfuckers who went to other countries, didn't respect the culture, and didn't make it back to their flights. I'm just keeping it 100. That's typically how that works. But the women are women. But the sad part about that, there are certain women, depending on what you are, as depending on your race, it's much harder to get or much harder to obtain than most other cultures. Because the sad part about that, an Indian woman is more likely to date an Asian man, or a white man, or a Arab man, or anything along the lines of that. They're less likely to date a black man. Let's just keep it 100. And the sad part about that is, when it comes down to it, if you ever see that type of relationship ever happen, that nigga, there's something special about that nigga. Basically, if you ever hear of a black man dating Indian women, there's something special about that. There's something special about that man, because there's no way in hell that basically he defied all odds. Um, he defied all odds to basically get to be able to do what he did, for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is, well, yeah, facts, they do. But the sad part about that, what I mean by Asians is they're more likely to date a Chinese or a Japanese or a Middle Eastern or a Korean than they are to date an actual black man. Is what I mean by that. They're willing to date all the neighboring countries in Asia before they date an actual black man. Is what I'm saying by that one. It's typically how that works. Pakistan, I think, falls. Pakistan, yeah, Pakistan counts. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, they all count. They all count as Indian. And the sad part about that, to me, they all count as Indian to me, because they basically were one big country at one point, and then they all decided that they wanted to fuck each other up and call it a day, basically. Um, Typically, is how that worked. Those countries are much more stricter on dating black guys than India actually is. I mean, well, India is strict by itself, but those countries tend to be a little bit more stricter, if not just as strict as India, when it comes to dating black guys. So if you're a black man and you're dating an Indian woman, nigga, you made it. Matter of fact, if you're a black guy dating an Indian woman, all eyes are on you, because they're trying to figure out how the fuck you do that. That's simply how it works. To be honest with you, like if you're a black guy dating an Indian woman, everybody's looking at you like, how the fuck did he do that? Either he got money or he got good D or he got something going on for her to want to be with that nigga, basically. And that's simply how that works. Like that's pretty much how it works. Like that's the best you can do as a black man. That is literally the best. That's literally the pinnacle of what you can do as a black man is date and marry an Indian woman. That's simply how it works. Because the sad part about that is dating a regular Asian woman, like a Chinese woman or a Japanese woman or anything like that. That's pretty much a no brainer. That's pretty much easy comparative to actually dating and marrying an Indian woman, or like dating and marrying an Arab woman is pretty easy too. Dating and marrying a Northern African Arab woman is not that hard either, despite the fact that the racial tensions between dark skin and light skin, you know, is pretty much how it works. And dating and marrying a African woman is not that hard either. Dating and marrying a white woman is not hard at all either. Dating and marrying a Latina, not hard at all. The list goes on for all intents and purposes when it comes down to it. The sad part about it is that's pretty much the best a black man can do. That's pretty much that's pretty much a black man's Everest right there. An Indian woman is a black man's Everest. Um, it's just facts. Um, that's the best that a black man can do in this whole entire world. If he can actually make it if he can actually make it to actually date and marry an Indian woman, that's the best he can do in this whole entire fucking world. Um, that's pretty much like climbing out Mount Everest. That's pretty much like dating an Indian woman. I'll give it to you like this. I'll give it to you on a visceral scale, visceral level. Dating an Indian woman would be like climbing Mount Everest with one arm tied behind your back and both your legs tied together. That's pretty much how hard it is to date an Indian woman. That's simply how hard it is. That's pretty much what it is. And the sad part about that is even when you actually see an Indian person, they're more likely to date a white man than they are to date than they are to date any other culture under the sun. And that's simply how it works. And I agree with you on that one. Take back your authority. Let them starve. I agree. Give them nothing. Give them nothing. It's typically how it works. But the sad part about that is when I hear stupid people in my lovely live stream, or I hear stupid people say, uh, yeah, and I understand what you're saying, Seeker. But at the same time, though, when they do date outside their race, they're more likely to date a white guy. It's just to be honest, it's more likely to date a white guy or a Chinese or an Asian guy, basically. And I mean, when I mean by Asian, I mean like one of the ones that's always at the top of the charts for like intelligence, like Koreans, Japanese, Chinese. For all intents and purposes, they're more likely to date those guys. If they can't find a white guy, they'll date the Asian guy. And if they can't find that guy, they'll basically date an Indian. Well, they'll date an Indian. Well, obviously Indian tends to be that's obvious for all intents and purposes. But the problem, the thing with a lot of this stuff is the thing with a lot of this stuff is it's not the fact that it's not the fact that if you leave your country you'll run into problems. It's the problem that a lot of people have leaving their countries and going out to actually meet people like this goofy dude have meeting people. Yeah, I'm talking Indians too. Yeah, I'm talking Indians also. They're more like if they're not dating anybody in their race, they're more likely to date a white guy or an Asian guy, an Asian guy from the Orients is what I was saying. Um, yeah, I know you call them Asians in there, but the sad part about that is I'm saying though in general, the type of people that they'll end up dating versus the type of people more. I'm talking about the people that they're statistically more likely to date if they don't date anybody who else is Indian for all intents and purposes. Is what I'm talking about. So if they're not dating an Indian, they're more likely to date a white guy or an Asian from the Orients. Is what I'm saying, Seeker. I know what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. But I'm basically trying to just differentiate the two, basically, so I can make it easy. So like, well, Asians, well, obviously Asians date Asians, Tico. I don't want somebody coming in and be like, well, obviously Asians date Asians, Tico. It's one of those things where it's one of those things where I'm actually trying to differentiate the two culturally for all intents and purposes, so I can actually make it much easier for people to understand, so they won't be like, well, that was stupid to say, Tico. Because at the end of the day, you do have to still differentiate them. You still have to differentiate them from each other so you can actually explain who you're talking about. Because like at the end of the day, just because they're Asian, that don't make them Orients. That don't make them Asians from the Orients for all intents and purposes. You see what I'm saying? Whereas just because they're Asian, that don't mean they're all Indian. You also have some Arabs. Just because they're Asian, that don't make them that don't make them all Indian, because I mean, just because they're Southeast Asian, that don't make them Indian, because because India's in Southeast Asia. You also got other countries like Singapore and you know places like that in Southeast Asia that actually makes it so it's like it is hard regardless. Yeah, it is very hard regardless, no matter how you cut it. And the sad part about that, is at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's 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 one of those things where like you have to be able to conduct yourselves you have to be able to conduct yourself in a professional manner when you travel to these countries, because a lot of these men who say this stupid shit in my last trade don't know how to conduct themselves in a professional manner, or don't know how to conduct themselves, period. And they act a straight fool when they get to other countries. And typically, a lot of the times, what happened with these people is if they go off the reservation, not reservation, I should say, they go off the resort, and they tend to they tend to get themselves into trouble. Is those types of people, so they tend to keep themselves on the resort for that reason. For that, you know. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I understood what you're saying. No, sweetheart. Yeah, but the sad part about that is you'll run into different various problems at the end of the day when it comes down to it. When it comes, if you're going to actually act like how you act when you're at home, you can't take your home life to it. You got to check your. Basically, here's how it works. And I've always said this when you travel to other countries: check your privilege. Check your Western world privilege at the door. And I don't mean like actual privilege. I don't mean white privilege. I don't mean that. Check your Western world privilege at the door. Only use it when it benefits you. Good example of that is if you're black and you travel to, let's say, Germany, or Poland, or Sweden. If you're African American, you travel to those places. You might run into some women that will say act black. That's the only time I would leave. That's the only time I would bring your Western world privilege with you. When you run into a woman that says act black, that's about it. That's it. That's the only time I'll bring it with you. That's pretty much how it is. Um, but the sad part about that, the sad part about that is how it ends up work. Just be yourself for all intents and purposes and respect the culture is the best way I can describe it to you. Be yourself and respect the culture. Because if you disrespect the culture, they're going to disrespect you most definitely. If you disrespect the culture, they're going to disrespect you. It's typically how that works. And the sad part about that is a lot of people, yeah, definitely stay humble. Always stay humble. The sad part about that, people don't know how to stay humble, and they want to do that this braggadocious shit when they get to other countries, especially countries where they don't got shit, and they wonder why they end up in the messes that they do, or end up robbed or beaten and shit like that. Don't be braggadocious in a third world country. It's a third world country still. You can still get robbed and end up missing for all intents and purposes in a third world country. Um, Yeah, but it's stuff like that. What's up, Casual Bachelor? And it's stuff like this that just blows my mind when I hear and see people say it and do it. And it's like, dude, what the hell's going on? What the hell are you doing wrong and to fuck up your life to make it so that you can't get what you need in life, or you can't get out anything out of life? Or why the hell are you making up these excuses just to tell people what they can and cannot do in other countries if they can and cannot do it in this country? Sad part about that is there's a fundamental difference between the mindset, because I've always said this: no two cultures are the same. No two countries are the same. The sad part about that is, despite the fact that feminism is rapidly growing around the world, a good example is the MGTOW red pill culture. The MGTOW red pill culture is different in first world countries, Western world, than it is in other countries for all intents and purposes. Not so Western world countries. Like a good example of that is MGTOW and Western world countries are against feminism. MGTOW and red pill in other countries are against traditionalism. Two totally different things. Same goal in mind, two totally different things. This is typically the difference between the cultures. Like when you start talking to people outside of the manosphere, I mean, people in the manosphere outside of the English speaking manosphere, or outside of the Western world, people outside of the Western world are against traditionalism, and people within the Western world are against feminism. This is what I mean by no two cultures are the same. No two cultures are ever the same. You also got to take that into mind. You got to take that in consideration too when you actually start doing things and looking at things a certain way. Because at the end of the day, like I said, in the Latin world, we're against traditionalism. Same thing goes for Indian world. Indian MGTOWs are more so against traditionalism than they are against feminism. Um, Shit like that. The same thing goes for Arabs. There's a lot of Arab. There's a nice Arab population in the manosphere, and they tend to be against traditionalism versus you know traditionalism versus actual feminism. The same goes for like several other countries also. Um, Especially Asian countries. Most or all Asian countries are against or against traditionalism, or against traditionalism versus actual feminism. That's typically how a lot of this stuff works. Um, yeah, self-preservation is never a bad thing. If you can't look at yourself or understand yourself, which is actually one of the points that I wanted to touch on in this one, if you can't look at yourself, control yourself, or understand yourself, and basically understand that you're not at home, and you can't act a fool, you're going to run into a lot of problems when you travel. It's typically how that works. You're going to run into a shit ton of problems when you travel to other countries. Because the sad part about that, it's fine that you're from America, but sometimes you got to check that America at the door. It's fine that you're from the UK, but when you get to this country, you may have to check that privilege at the door and actually be humble. So basically, what you have to do is actually humble yourselves. You basically have to humble yourselves to make it so that you can actually be able to do what you need to do. To do what you need to do is to better yourself as a man. If you can't humble yourself, you're going to run into a shit ton of problems, and you're going to be in a world of hurt. Um, that's typically how a lot of this shit works. Um, well, no, it's not even the fact that they're at the beginning stages. It's just the fact that, like I was saying, there's a difference between feminists and womanists. Basically, a lot of the other world refer to them as womanists for the fact that they're traditional, but they have like some of the same traits, but they basically hide it and package it in a pretty bow of traditionalism for all intents and purposes. They have some of the same traits, but they don't have all of the same traits as feminists. Basically, they're not running around here acting stupid like that one. Because I look at it like this: that one Indian woman who said on live TV, was he Indian or Arab? Said on live TV, how many men do we need to kill to make them stop raping women? For all intents and purposes, wouldn't be able to get away with that in her own country. she would be dead, hung, shot, stoned, the whole 9 yards for all intents and purposes. She would never see the light of day in her own country. That's typically how that works, and that's pretty much just cold hard reality when it comes down to it. Um, it all comes down to people not really being able to handle handle their handle their handle themselves properly from handle themselves properly or being able to do things. Because the sad part about that, women like that can only get away with that in Western world. If they were to do that in their own country, they wouldn't be as easy on them as the Western world would be on them for all intents and purposes. They would have to suffer the consequences. Which is a bigger issue, traditionalism or feminism? In the Western world, feminism. Outside the Western world, traditionalism. That's pretty much how it works. Because you're starting to get these groups of women that you know who are very traditional, but they hold some progressive values that make it difficult for men for all intents and purposes. So it's traditionalism. It's I refer to it as basically refer to it as not a la carte. It's basically traditionalism with steroids or on steroids. It'd be traditionalism, but I would like these two things to go with my traditionalism for all intents and purposes. Be the best way to do it. Um, it's typically the difference between what my grandmother says and what these women would say. Both my grandmothers, both my black one and my Latina one, said, and I quote, "I wasn't outside burning my bra. I would like to be treated like a lady." That's pure traditionalism in a nutshell. I wasn't outside burning my bra. I would like to be treated like a lady. And that's typically their views on feminism and traditionalism. These new age women, for all intents and purposes, because at the end of the day, a lot of these men are actually fighting a traditionalism for the fact that, like, here's the thing about traditionalism that people don't seem to understand, like, especially people who are trad-cons. There are a lot of men that don't feel like working themselves to the bone and dying to provide for their family, like basically living to work to feed their family. There's a lot of guys that don't feel like doing that shit. And this is typically the problem with the whole entire traditionalism thing. And this is what I mean by traditionalism when it comes down to it in a nutshell. There's a lot of guys who are with women who are taking care of whole entire families who don't want to be doing that, and they would like help from the house. They would like help from other people in the household, their better half in the household. This is typically the problem that a lot of them are running into. They don't want to. They don't feel, because at the end of the day, it's not the greatest thing to work like a man and then come home to a person either not that's not on point, or a person that's not really helping out for all intents and purposes. So a lot of the traditional problems come from the actual workload basis the bill load for all intents and purposes. The workload, them working to actually live for all intents and purposes. So there's a lot of men that just work to pay for their family and survive for all intents and purposes. Or I should say work to survive so they can survive by their family for all intents and purposes. Every day they're above the ground, their family's basically doing good. It's typically what I mean by that. Is the best way I can describe that to you, sweetheart. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of men that are tired of actually being the breadwinners, and they're tired of actually being the only income coming into the house. This is typically where that traditionalism problem actually comes into play. Um, so they're tired of it for the fact that women get to basically sit at home on their ass and not do anything and complain about not being able to complain about their lives being bored when in fact there's nothing made, the house isn't clean, and shit along the lines of that for all intents and purposes. Then there's a lot of men, I don't know why, that also falls under this level of traditionalism too, that believe that they come home from work and they feel bad that their wife is on her hands and knees scrubbing the floor. So there's that problem. And the sad part about that, usually when you see that, those are usually poor families for all intents and purposes that can't afford the trappings of like a vacuum cleaner or a something that would be seen as that would be taken for granted in the Western world. That's typically the traditionalism I'm talking about. That's typically traditional problems that I'm talking about. There's a lot of men in these cultures that they come home and they see their wives on all fours, like literally cleaning the floor with a scrub brush or a toothbrush or a cloth or you know something along the lines of that. And they don't want that no more. That's the traditional that they're actually trying to get rid of. Then are the traditional people who are with women who really don't put any work at home and listen to the women complain that they want to get rid of that. So that's pretty much how that is. Like you got a lot of lazy women that get on their high horse and not really finish their actual wifely duties. That's that level of traditionalism that I was referring to. Um, Greetings. What's up, New Era Monk? What's up? I already said MGTOW Threads. What's up? That okay. Spanish police. Yeah, Spanish police will do that to you, especially in Latin America. Those police will do that to you in a heartbeat, especially Jamaican police. They will humble you in a heartbeat. They will humble the hell out of you in a heartbeat. And that's the cold hard truth in those countries. If you can't humble yourself, they will humble you for you. That's simply how that works. And just believe, just because you're an American or just because you belong to another country that's a part of the UN that got some power, that don't mean shit when you get arrested in another country. That's simply how that works. Um, yeah, for the most part. But yeah. What's up, Baron Yam? Sup? Yeah, okay, yeah. Everybody saying what's up, Yam. I work to live. I eat to live. I own gun. I own guns to live. Hey, that's you. Do you? As long as you ain't got to do it for nobody else and you do it for yourself, that's all that matters, Pimpin. That's all that matters. That means you ain't putting no extra stress load on yourself. You're not putting the extra stress load on yourself, and that's a good thing. It's like as long as you ain't putting no extra stress loads on yourself, that's all that matters, Pimpin. That's all that matters. Like as long as the stress is only on you and you're only providing for you, as long as you have fun at the end of it, that's all that matters. MGTOW Threads. That's basically a good life. Good life, Pimpin. Hey, help me out here. A friend of mine has a girlfriend. Is that proverbial a friend of mine has a girlfriend and I want advice for him, Yam, or is this actually a friend? That's typically how it works. Um, well, he's basically usually the funny thing about Latin culture is women tend to stay home a lot longer than men in the Latin culture. I've noticed. Men can stay at home, but men tend to leave the house faster than women do. And the sad part about that, what I've noticed with the Latin culture is, what's up, Agruda Ghost? What I've noticed with Latin culture is, like if a woman gets into a relationship and she falls out of that relationship or something happens to her significant other, she's more likely to move back home with her mom than the male is for all intents the son is for all intents purposes. Um, Typically how that works. Even if she has children, she's more likely to move back home and have a little bit better support system with her mother than it would be if it was a son in a Latin culture. Because at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it's like this is where you actually see the family unit actually shine in the Latin culture when shit like this actually happens. Because there's a lot of women who were in relationships, fell out of those relationships somehow, some way, let it be some random reason, and ended up living back with their mothers if they have a decent relationship with their mothers. The sad part about that, a lot of them don't even have a decent relationship with their mothers, but the fact that their mothers actually have grandchildren, it actually eases the stress between the two for all intents and purposes. Is one thing that I've noticed about the Latin culture. Um, that's typically how that works. Um, but at the end of the day, in a Latin culture, you still have to respect your mother and your father. You still have to respect your padres. No matter how much you like it or not, you still have to respect your padres. if you don't respect your padres or your madre, you're pretty much going to be a world in hurt. You're going to be in a world of hurt when it comes to Latin culture because they're more likely to put you out. If you're disrespecting the culture, you're disrespecting the name because it always comes down to the name and culture. You're ass out. You're going to be ass out, cash out, basically, in the Latin culture if you disrespect them culturally. That typically is the same across the board for a lot of these other traditional cultures, like Arab culture. Oh yeah, if you don't get stoned, you're pretty much shunned or kicked out to the curb. Yeah, the sad part about that, there's a lot of Latin kids that don't understand their culture. Like a good example of that is like, had my grandma has shunned my uncle while we were living in the United States, people would see that as horrible, and my grandma would probably be arrested for negligence or something like that for all intents and purposes. Um, because you can't be disrespectful enough. Because the thing about Latin culture and the thing about a lot of the cultures around the world that people don't seem to understand is do not disrespect the culture and do not disrespect the family name. Or as they say in Arab cultures, don't bring shame upon the family name. Is typically what they say in Arab cultures, and it's all it really is. That's all it really is. That's all it really is. Is just don't bring shame to her. Don't bring shame to the culture, and don't bring shame to the family name. Is all it really is. In a nutshell, if you can follow that, you're pretty much making it in life. Because the sad part about that is being able to actually not bring shame to the family name and not bring shame to the culture. You're actually ahead of. You're actually much more ahead in life than you would be if you're anybody else in the culture for all intents and purposes. The best way I can describe it to you. Like a good example of a Latina or a Latino who can actually respect the culture and respect the family name, actually get ahead more in life than a person that don't respect the family name or respect the culture. That's simply how that works. We still love you, but we love you less than what we would if you were respecting the culture and respecting your family name. It's simply how it works. It's one of those things. This thing got into a cultural thing. Yeah, I know. um, yeah, homeless women are still fat. Well, we also have consideration too. If you live in a first world country, if you live in a first world country, there's always soup kitchens and homeless shelters that'll feed you in a first world country. It's typically how that works. So they're going to be fat no matter what, and they're not going to ever really lose the weight. Now there are guys who are homeless who look like pencil sticks, and typically, it's one of those things where like they're literally roughing it. They're literally roughing it. The women who are homeless, there's a high chance they're selling pussy. I hate to say it like that, but it's true. High chance if a woman's homeless, she's selling pussy, and this is how she's eating good, and this is why she's taken care of. This is pretty much how it works. So the sad part about that, if a woman's homeless, there's always that simp ass motherfucker that'll take her in. Let's just keep it 100. There's always that simp ass motherfucker who's desperate and would smash a homeless woman to get some pussy, basically. That's simply how a lot of this shit works, and this is what a lot of people don't seem to understand when it comes down to it. Yeah, hey, and the sad part about that, she always got options no matter what. Even if she's homeless, she always has options for all intents and purposes. Even if she's sleeping on the street, she's able to get money. Because matter of fact, I know a homeless woman that's literally tricking so she can eat every day and be able to keep her cell phone on. That's homeless, and it's the funniest thing in the world to watch happening. And the sad part about that is it's just one of those things where it's like it just happens that way for all intents and purposes. Because you're not going to see no homeless guy get no woman. Let's just keep it 100. But you'll see a homeless woman getting a guy. This is typically what we talk about the disparity when it comes to dating for all intents and purposes. Um, this is typically the disparity when it comes down to it. Um, so it would never be equal for that reason because women will always have the leg up. Women will always have the leg up in the dating market, no matter if they're homeless or not. They'll always have the leg up. If they're fat, homeless, don't got no teeth, they'll always have the leg up. It's pretty much how that works. Yeah, food is everywhere in the Western world for all intents and purposes. So she's going to be able to be fat and eat good. She's never going to lose. She's never going to lose who she is as a woman unless she gets AIDS and she doesn't. She's not able to afford her AIDS medication. Then that's when you'll see her start losing weight. Or she's well, I've seen fat crackheads, so that's damn near impossible too. Now that I think about it, because I've seen some fat ass crackheads too. So yeah, that's pretty much how that works. Thanks, Americas. But typically, a lot of the problems that a lot of the women run into is brought on by themselves. Um, a lot of the people, a lot of anything that happens to a woman is pretty much brought on by herself. Um, so it's one of those things where like you have to basically be able to give a woman tough love, give a person tough love, no matter if you like it or not. You have to be able to give them tough love for this reasoning because at the end of the day, it's pretty much what it is. So it's one of those things where you got to be able to um um well here in the Netherlands, many people with an ethnic background when they go on vacation to our country or parents' country, we get treated like shit because of the our disrespectful Western behavior. Well, yeah, you are going to be treated like shit for all of intents purposes. Like, good example of that is don't feel bad about that. Crew to Ghost. I actually get treated like crap when I actually go back home. Um, Especially when I go to Jamaica and I go to the cockpits of Jamaica. The cockpits of Jamaica, which is actually in the middle of nowhere in Jamaica. When I go back there, I get treated like shit in a village for all intents purposes, and they tend to treat me like I'm soft or less than for all intents purposes because I'm living this cushy lifestyle according to them, um, which is pretty much what it is. The same thing when I go to Santali, when I go to Santali country in India, I get treated like crap too. So don't feel bad at all. Don't feel bad in the least bit about that shit. Um, the same goes for when I go to Costa Rica. I'm usually fine. When I go to Bree, that's when the shit actually starts hitting the fan, and they start fucking with me because I live in a disrespectful culture, and while living in America is typically how it works. So it's one of those things where like, it happens to a lot of people who come from multicultural or ethnic backgrounds for all intents and purposes. When they actually travel home, you're going to catch some heat. You're going to catch some scathing glares because they expect you to act like everybody from the country that you're living in currently. And the sad part about that, this is typically why I always say, humble yourself before you go home, because if you don't do it, your home country will do it for you. Wherever your mom and dad grew up, they'll do it for you in a heartbeat, and it's going to hurt. You're going to get a reality check, and it's going to hurt your fucking feelings. And you're never going to want to go back and visit it again for all intents and purposes because you're so used to being so arrogant, and you're so used to the same culture, the non-culture culture of your country that you're in. You tend to actually carry that with you to another country. So you also got to work. You also got to learn to check that at the door when it comes down to it. When you go home to visit people, because they'll look at you in a different light, and you'll get a little bit more respect. They'll still fuck with you, but they'll look at you in a bit of a different light. It won't be hard. It won't be as hard as they're normally grilling you or roasting you if you don't check that, if you don't check your if you're not humble when you go home for all intents and purposes. It's typically how that works because I catch that hell all the fucking time. Anytime I step outside the borders and I go to Bree, I go to Santal, I go to visit Santal people, and I go to visit go to the cockpits of Jamaica. I catch that hell and I catch that heat all the time. Um, yeah, I believe that 100%. No, sweetheart. I work in the medical field, and I pretty much already know what that was. What do I think of Japan right now? Um, as far as Japan's concerned, um, culturally, it's bad, but at the same time, it's kind of sort of one of those things where it's like people we talk about how bad Japan is now. The sad part about that, Japan was already bad before this. Like, let's just keep it 100. Japan was already bad before this shit. They were just more discreet about the shit that they did for all intents and purposes versus now. So all the shit that they're doing now, they've been doing, they were just more discreet about it. They were more conservative about the shit that they did. So it's one of those things where it's like it's one of those things where it's like as far as their behavior is concerned, they're basically the same group of people, only they're much more open about it for all intents and purposes. And that's simply all it really is when it comes to Japan. Because I'm sorry, before this whole entire having sex in public, they have vending machines with panties in them, my dude. They have vending machines with panties in them. They sell panties out of vending machines in Japan. Let's just keep it 100, my dude. Let's just keep it 100. So, yeah, Japan was already like this. They have Qigong trains in Japan before this was even a big thing. They had trains where, like, the sex clubs where they had, Qigong trains where they were actually literally doing this shit. And they actually have clubs where, like, you get on the train and, that's pretty much the train where that happens on for all intents and purposes. The train, the subway or the train that happens on for all intents and purposes. So Japan's always been like this for all intents and purposes. It's not. Yeah, true story. Fat AIDS. Yeah, America has fat AIDS patients, which is actually pretty funny. Um, so as far as Japan's concerned, yeah, but the sad part about that is the best way I can describe it to you, like I was saying earlier, Garuda Ghost, is you got to basically be able to be humble and leave that at the door. You actually got to embrace your culture when you actually go home, and because the thing about culture is how can I explain this in a good way? A good example of that is Bree. Now, if you know anything about me, um, I speak Bree. Now, the problem is being outside of being out because Bree is not a culture. Bree is not a language that's written down, and it takes muscle memory to actually remember Bree. You basically have to keep on practicing it on a regular basis because it's not written down. Unless you write it down yourself, which I'm not fin to do, it can actually be very chaotic and hectic. Okay, the best way I describe this to you, Gruda Ghost, is after a while of being in America, I've actually lost touch with a lot of the Bree language. Okay, cool. Um, now, now, my grandma's the first to tell you when you start sounding like shit when it comes to certain languages. My grandma will let you know in a heartbeat. My tias will let you know in a heartbeat, and the Bree people will let you know in a heartbeat. They'll be ashamed of you for all intents and purposes because they had such high hopes for you, but you shamed the culture for all intents and purposes. The best way I can describe it to you. So I basically had to brush up on my Bree whole hella of a lot, hella a lot. In the last uh, about a couple of years ago, I had to brush up on my Bree for that reasoning because I was catching hella flack and hella shame from the Bree people because I've forgotten it. Um, just typically how that works. Another good example of a language that I've actually lost track of is Kromani or Kromani or the Akan language. It's a part of the Akan African language tree, and it's typically the language. It's pretty much the language of Maroons. The problem with that is if you don't speak it well, or if you tend to not really, it's not one of them languages that no matter how much you learn it, you can actually retain it because it's not written down anywhere. There's not no written language for the Kromani language for all intents and purposes for that reason. And what I mean by that is it's muscle memory doesn't work for that language for the fact that you have to keep on practicing it because it's not written down anywhere and there's no way in hell you can actually go to a library, look it up, and be like, okay, this, and that, and learn it again. You actually literally got to actually be speaking it. That's another language that I suffered in that I caught hell for not being able to speak properly and I basically got told that I'm disrespectful to my cultures for both those cultures for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is that actually hurt my pride and actually hurt my ego to the point where, you know, they were literally not talking to me unless I could speak it properly. So, like, a nigga would starve in Bree or a nigga would starve in a village if I don't speak those languages properly. So I literally had to take a crash course in that shit, so I won't be seen as somebody that's disrespectful to my cultures. Is the best way I can describe it to you. Um, and it's shit like this that it's shit like this that makes it so. It's shit like this that makes it so that when you get disconnected from your culture, everybody in your culture feels like you're disrespecting the culture, or you're not up to par, or you're not who you are culturally for all intents and purposes. So you'll catch that flack, you'll catch that heat from your culture the most for that reason, especially family. You're going to catch that because your mom's going to catch it too. Your mom, or your dad's going to catch that shit too. For all intents and purposes, is typically how it works. So it's one of those things where, like, your family's going to catch hell for that one, and your mom's probably still catching your mom or your dad, depending on who's culturally from that part of the woods, that neck of the country, what neck of the world is going to catch most of the flack for it. You're going to catch some of the flack for it for being an offspring of that person too. So I would definitely say brush up culturally on yourself culturally, most definitely. I know we talked about it, and I said you said you were brushing up on yourself culturally. So just keep at it and keep hitting the books. Basically, is all I can really tell you on that one. Because if the minute you stop, the minute people start talking shit in your family, you don't want to be sitting there in the village hungry as hell and not eating and not eating because you can't speak the language properly. Because they're when it comes to cultures like that, they're sticklers and a half when it comes to being able to practice your culture and speak the language. And your ass will be starving, or your ass won't be able to have no place to lay your head down at night if you can't speak the languages properly. And it's typically what it is. It's basically tough love. Culture. I call it cultural tough love. Is the best way I can describe that to you, Garita Ghost. And to answer your question, yes, they still make great cars. They still make great cars. McTal Therese, they still make great cars. Jim's in his cast. Yeah, it's typically how that works. Thanks, Seeker. The sad part about that is people don't realize that a lot of the times that even though they're going through some shit, Japan is actually making a play to actually take a lot of this manufacturing shit out of China and bring it back to Japan. So they're actually making moves to do that. So that should make them a much more stronger, and it should make them less dependent on China for all intents and purposes, just in case shit happens again like that. So yeah, Japan is actually really working on that right now. Shinzo Abe? Shinzo Abe is basically, he's the man when it comes to that. So I actually have faith in him if he actually follows through with it. That is, because how people they'll talk a big game and then like back off. So we got to watch out for that. Yeah, that's actually very true. You got to leave the hood to be humble before you can go back into the hood for all intents and purposes. The problem with that though is you'll run into a lot of people in the hood who are about that hood life, and the only thing they know is the hood life and the hood this and hood that and hood that. You'll run into those people that'll fuck with you though, for all intents and purposes. But it's always good to leave the hood to get a good perspective of the world and everything around you, because your world is not your hood, and the hood is not your world. It's not the world for all intents and purposes. So the minute you can actually leave is a good thing. And when I say leave, I don't mean like go to another state. I mean go travel throughout the world to actually understand the world better. You'll get better values about yourself. You'll understand yourself a lot better, and people would understand you a lot better if you're able to humble yourself, leaving the hood. Because the sad part about that, just because you hood in your hood, that don't mean that you're going to be hood in Juarez. You're not going to be hood in Costa Rica. You're not going to have the same hood credibility in Albania. Certain parts of Great Britain. That hood mentality doesn't transfer over to other countries for all intents and purposes, because you'll find out very quickly, just because you're hood in America, that don't always translate to hood in Jamaica, or translate to hood in Latin America, or translate to hood in Albania or Russia. Because the sad part about that is, when it comes down to it, a lot of these countries will always out hood your hood. Especially if you live in America, your hood would be nothing. Your hood is nothing comparative to the hoods over there. So everybody talk about the Section 8 shit and gangster life shit. When you get to another country, you'll find out very quickly that that gangster shit and that Section 8 shit housing is basically gold. And a lot of motherfuckers wish they had that Section 8 housing and or, the what's it called? The public assistance and all the school lunches and the summer lunch program shit that you have in your own country. A lot of these countries don't have that shit. That's simply how that works. It is very true. America does need family cohesion. Without family cohesion, the children will act like the way they are, and the country would go down a route that is going down now without family cohesion. Family cohesion is very important. Family cohesion is 100% important. You can't really do shit without family cohesion, and you can, but you're going to suffer a shit ton of setbacks doing it. Because the sad part about that is, without no cohesion, you don't know who you are as a human being. And without knowing who you are as a human being, you'll run into a shit ton of problems that you don't need to run into. Um, it's one of those things where it's one of those things where it's like you definitely got to be you definitely need that cohesion. Because the sad part about that is I agree with MGTOW Threads about it being a myth, because it's actually a myth in the Western worlds. It's actually a big myth in the Western worlds, because the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, what they look at as family cohesion is different than what Latin America looks at as family cohesion, or what India looks at as family cohesion, what Japan looks at as family cohesion, what China looks at as family cohesion, or what Arabs look at as family cohesion. And the sad part about that, what I mean by that is the definition of cohesion is much different in a Western world than it is in a third world country or the rest of the world. Because at the end of the day, I would say family cohesion. The definition of family cohesion in America is mama this, mama that, mama this, mama that, and I love my mama. Despite the fact that your mama is the one that got you into the mess or the living situations that you're in herself, everything's about mama. You see what I'm saying? Whereas the Western world, everything's about papa and mama. If you know what I mean. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these other cultures respect their parents, their grandparents, and so on and so on and forth on and forth on. In America, you pretty much stick your grandparents in nursing homes, or you'll stick your parents in nursing homes too, if they're old enough. And that's pretty much what family cohesion is. You raise me, now I stick you in nursing home. That's pretty much how it works in America. So I'm not shocked when I see a lot of this shit going on in America, in the least bit. I'm actually much more shocked when I see a man or a woman, or a married couple, or a man or a woman taking care of their parents. That's much more shocking to me than any damn thing in America. And that's typically all it really is. So the family cohesion is a myth when it comes to America. Because at the same time, I can actually point out a lot of Latin families in America who don't really practice that family cohesion that they would in Latin America. I'm just keeping it 100. The same thing goes for Asians. The same thing goes for other people. The same thing goes for Asian, Arabs, everybody else, Indians. They get to America, they lose their fucking mind and act like they ain't got no fucking sense. Good example of that is my my primas, double-ass sisters. If they were in India, they wouldn't act like they do. They wouldn't be acting like how they act now if they were in America, if they were in India for all intents and purposes. But they can get away with the shit because it's America. And they can treat people the way they do and talk to people any old type of way because they're in America. You see what I'm saying? So that family cohesion actually goes out the window when you actually come to America. It is what's needed, most definitely. But the sad part about that is people would actually have to spend time with their children, and they would actually have to teach their children culture for that to remotely be a thing again. Is the best way I describe that to you, Americas. So people would literally have to actually teach their children this stuff for it to remotely be a thing again. Definitely MGTOW threads. um, thanks, no sweetheart. The sad part about that, yeah, they do have diplomatic immunity when it comes to certain things. And the sad part about, well, no, they don't have diplomatic immunity. They have ignorance immunity. They have look the other way or turn a blind eye immunity for all intents and purposes. Because a lot of the countries, because everybody knows that they rely on China so hard and so much that they tend to look the other way when China does something wrong because most of their shit comes from China. It's pretty much how it works. And the sad part about that, this is the thing that a lot of people in like first world countries don't seem to understand, especially with their brands, is a lot of your brands, a lot of the parts to your brands are actually manufactured outside of your country. You simply just slap a badge on it when it gets to your country and assemble the shit all together. It's pretty much how it is. Like the engines are done in Canada, the seats, the seats, and the seats and everything else, and the steering wheel and all that stuff's done in Mexico. The catalytic converter and other components are done in China. So by the time it actually reaches America, about 70% of your car or 80% of your car was actually manufactured outside of your country. And how they actually get away with actually saying it was made in America is they just assemble it. They assemble all the parts in America is typically how that works. That's how they get away with actually saying it's American made. Because the sad part about that, a lot of the products that you actually buy and love today are actually put together. The parts are actually separate and they're put together. They're made by other countries and they bring it to America and they put it together. It'd be like equivalent. It'd be like a good example of that is if the best visual description for it is a jigsaw puzzle. Think of anything you buy in America like a jigsaw puzzle. Think of like all the pieces to the jigsaw puzzle, the box, everything. Let's say the box was made in China or Taiwan. The puzzle pieces were made in China. Now it gets to you, you put it together, and you're in America. You technically put it together in America. Am I right or wrong? So in all technicality, it was built in America. You see what I'm saying? That's typically how they get around that shit. With a lot of this shit, and people believe that I'm buying American-made stuff. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not buying American-made stuff anymore. You're buying shit that was put together. You're buying shit that was in pieces and manufactured and put together into one big vision or one big thing that you're actually looking at today. It's basically like a big ass jigsaw puzzle. The box is from Taiwan. The puzzle pieces are made in fucking China. You put it when you get the box, you open it, and you dump out all the pieces. You put it together, and you're in America. It's made in America. It's put together in America, or it's made in America, or built in America. Is typically the way to get away with a lot of that shit. So a lot of the shit that the people know and love as American-made products is actually put together elsewhere. It's not American-made products. I would say at most, I would say anything you buy that says that they claim is American-made was probably put together 70% outside of the country. I would say 65% to be nicer outside of the country. 65% of it was made outside the country. It's simply how that works. And that goes for any product you could possibly buy. Afro-Caribbean Wax Museum? Are you just being random now, Yam? They actually do have an Afro-Caribbean Wax Museum, but I think you're just being simple right now, so I'm gonna just skip over that one. um, well, the sad part about that is, yeah, and it's going to happen that way. But the sad part about that, what you fail to realize is even a lot of those products are that yeah, a lot of those products that you know and love today that you think is American made were actually manufactured elsewhere and put together in America. This is typically how America gets away with it. The sad part about that is We do everything on a cheap. Hell, we even build buildings on a cheap. I was talking about a building that got built not too long ago, and not even a couple months after it was actually erected, it started getting cracks in the actual wall and the actual foundation, or in the actual ground. Walking the ground outside of this building actually started cracking too, because we do shit cheaply and we do shit very quickly. It's all about how fast we can get this done and how cheap we can get it done for within a timely manner for all intents and purposes. Usually, how that shit works. Um, so you'll run into those problems, and the sad part about that is America's not exempt from those problems either, because we can barely make it. Let's put it this way, America Seville. When's the last time you rode on a road that was paved, and what's the last time you rode on a road that was paved not too long ago, but now has a pothole again? Let's just keep it 100. Or when's the last time you actually seen something built, like a building built, and it didn't have any problems, and it didn't suffer from any cracks or anything like that for all intents and purposes in America? Because I've seen a lot of buildings that got built recently that's supposed to be new state-of-the-art buildings that have a shit ton of problems. So it's one of those things where you got to take in consideration too that a lot of this shit's going to happen. When golf, yeah, Mexico pretty much built it. Yeah, a lot of the American cars are basically, a lot of their parts are actually assembled, are actually made and manufactured in Mexico, Canada, and China. They get assembled in America. This is typically how they get around the American-made thing. It'd be no different if it'd be no different. But remember back in the day when a long time ago, China was actually trying to change the name of the city to USA, so you can say it's made in the USA. It's pretty much the same concept when it comes to American-made things. It's not; they're not really made in the USA. They're just assembled in the USA. That's the best way to put it. A lot of the products that you buy and love today are assembled in the United States. And the sad part about that, you'll be shocked on how many Chinese products you're actually using that you think are American made only. Is pretty much, and that's always been one of the um and like Route 30 collapse. Yeah, pretty much Midtown to Win is basically naming streets and highways, and you know naming streets and highways are all fucked up after being paved. And it's typically how the sad part about this is typically how Americans go about paving their streets. That makes it so it's fucked up. And it's sad to say it, but it's so fucking true. Like if you do if you do construction at a certain time of the year every year, and you know that your streets are going to be fucked up by summertime and or spring, and by that time next year, why do it at that time of year? Besides the fact that keep giving yourself work for all intents and purposes. That's typically the only thing I can think of on why they actually do that. It's the only reason why I can think of actually doing that. Like a good example is, you've ever noticed in America, a lot of the road work is done just before, just like smack dab in the middle of fall, just before, just as winter's starting, or just as winter's going on. It's typically how a lot of the it's typically just in fall for all intents and purposes. It's typically when a lot of the construction work is done. Now, if you know anything about doing construction work about that time of year and fall close to winter, is when you get done with it, when winter happens, that shit's gonna expand. Winter's gonna make it expand. Um, the neat thing about it is, if you do it during the hot months like spring, summer, it's gonna contract. It's gonna contract for all intents and purposes, and it's going to be able to be done properly for all intents and purposes. Well, no, let me say not contract. A lot of the grounds are going to swell in the summertime, then are going to contract in the wintertime. Is what I meant to say. I'm sorry. It's typically how that works. So how it works is, when stuff gets cold, when stuff gets cold, it's going to contract. Think of it like this. Have you ever had a wooden door with a wooden door frame in the middle in the dead of summer, and you go to close it, and after a while, the door swells, and you start having troubles closing your door, and there's like a lot of friction, and it's much harder to close your door in the summertime because of the swelling of the wood for all intents and purposes. But the neat thing about that, when winter rolls around, you have perfectly fine doors. They contract back down to normal size. Is the best way I can actually describe that to you. It's the same thing that goes for concrete, the same thing that goes for wood, the same thing that goes for steel, the same thing that goes for titanium, ceramic, plastic, any material that you use. It basically expands, it swells basically, then it, like in the wintertime, it goes back for all intents and purposes. So the sad part about that is you're basically doing your road work in winter when the ground goes back to normal size. But then the sad part about that is, then after that, you wonder why you got potholes in the summertime and springtime for the fact that everything started swelling and expanding, because now you're actually, the sad part about that, what happens with that is you're not filling it with the proper amount of asphalt or concrete for all intents and purposes, and this is typically how a lot of this shit actually works. You're not filling it properly. You're filling it for cold weather, but you're not overcompensating for the warm weathers that's to come. So now you got a pothole in the middle of summer going into fall again. And that's typically how that works. If you ever notice, the same stretch of roads are always getting repaired, quote unquote, and some are just left in disarray. Like I remember the one time I damn near lost a tire in a pothole in Pittsburgh going across the Smithfield Street Bridge. My whole entire car fell into this fucking pothole. I damn near lost my axle and my tire. And I think Midtown and Win know what street I'm talking about when I say this shit. It literally had a big ass pothole to the point where like your whole entire tire and front end falls into this bitch. Then you'd be lucky if your wheel didn't snap off or break or get shit. You'd be shocked if your car didn't get crash into the shit for all intents and purposes. Um, it's basically what it is. Um, yeah, and then it's pretty much the same thing when it. That's just on the East Coast. Well, obviously, there's a lot of those roads on the I-70, I-24, I-81, I-80, I-40. Yeah, those are all West Coast. Those are all East Coast roads. I've traveled those roads many times. Um, this is true. Concrete does expand. Yeah, it does. You mean inverse? You know what we mean. You don't got to get all be all the stickler about this shit. Damn, McTown to win. Grand Street or Liberty? Yeah, right. See, I knew exactly where I was talking about. Grand Street or Liberty? Yep. Both streets actually. Both streets. Grand is actually cobblestone though, which actually you can actually replace those pretty easily. But if you don't do it, you'll end up in a big ass cobblestone pothole. But usually it's Liberty where you have all the problems with. um, but yeah, some parts of Smithfield, some parts of Liberty, some parts of Wood Street, even you'll have problems with potholes. Um, True, very true. To answer to return a response to MGTOW threads on that, very true, very fucking true, very fucking true. I only know that because I dated one. Asian women in general. Asian women in general, I would say Chinese women more so, to be honest with you. Um, but Asian women in general. Um, Chinese women more so. Um, Grand Street and Liberty is plucked. Flucked. Yeah. I'm guessing you've been down Grant Street in Pittsburgh, MGTOW threads. I have college credits in physics. Yeah, nice. That's actually pretty nice. And the sad part about that is when it comes down to it, you have to really understand what you're going up against and stuff like that in this world. To get back on topic, because we did start talking about culture. Culture, I could add cultures because I did say no two cultures are the same. So I can talk about culture. But to get back to the actual thing at hand, what you basically want to do is basically know yourself and know your limitations when you travel in this world. Because like I said, no two cultures are the same, and you got to be able to adjust accordingly to different cultures. Just because they speak English in Great Britain, that don't mean that you can be a black man from America in Great Britain. You actually got to act a part in Great Britain. The neat thing about it is, if you've ever noticed, the black people in Great Britain are actually more conservative than conservatives in America. Um, yeah, black people in Great Britain are more conservative than actual conservative people in Great Britain. That's typically how that works. So being black in Great Britain is a bit different. You actually got to be able to be respectful culturally to the black people of the Afro Europeans over there, because their culture is a bit more conservative than the liberal black culture in America. So you got to be able to check your hood privilege at the door, because you'll get disrespected in Great Britain quite hard if you try to take that shit with you. It's typically how that works. And the sad part about that is when it comes down to it, like I said, no two cultures are the same, even if you speak English. Good example of that is Canada. Black people in Canada are a lot different than black people in America. Black people, well, a lot of black people elsewhere are a lot different than black people in America. Let it be Europe, let it be Africa, let it be Caribbeans, let it be Latin America, let it be Canada, let it be New Zealand, let it be Australia, let it be any of the European countries. Black people in India, black people in Asia, black people everywhere are much different than black people in America. The neat thing about the black people elsewhere is the black people elsewhere actually have a common core with each other, even though they live outside the countries, and they tend to have a bit of a respect. They tend to have a bit of an unspoken respect for each other when they actually run into each other, versus when they actually run into an African American. That's typically how a lot of that stuff works. So no two cultures are the same, and respect cultures. Um, when it comes down to it, because it's not always going to be um, it's not always going to be in your best interest to be able to just act like you're stupid in those countries for all intents and purposes. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But most times, Shinobi One showed up. About time Shinobi One. But most times, it tends to not work in your favor if you're going to do so. Um, Articulate words in English. Yeah, sure, you got to be able to do that. Well, for one thing. American niggas is terrible. Yeah, that's actually pretty true. Um, yeah, they tend to. I wouldn't say they're terrible as much as they just don't. They act like they ain't got no sense sometimes. I mean, not all of them. A good majority of them act like they ain't got no damn sense sometimes. And the sad part about that, I've known women who travel to other countries that be popping off at the mouth, snapping their fingers, bobbing their damn head. They get to them other countries, and they learn very quickly that's not the best thing for them to do. This is typically what I talk about when I say women are socially smart, socially and emotionally smart, because women will get to other countries and they tend to learn very quickly that this is not something that they want to act like, or this is not something that they want to do if they want to live in this country or not be treated like shit in this country. And the sad part about that, women are very good at it, better at it than men are for all intents and purposes. Is usually how it works. Men will go over there, still be trying to act gangster and end up missing, or end up in jail, or end up just in some stupid shit trying to be gangster. It's typically how a lot of that shit works. Just be yourself. You don't gotta always be gangster. Sometimes you gotta check that gangsterness at the damn door because that shit will actually get you. Because the sad part about your gangster life in America is not real life around the world, nor is your gangster life in America. You can't even compare your gangster life in America to gangster life in other countries either. Gangster life's a bit different in other countries and a bit more savage in other countries, which is actually very true and sad. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to, you got to be able to, do right by yourself and better yourself for all intents and purposes to be able to make it in other countries. Um, I know I'm picking on you, Shinobi One. I like picking on you for no reason because it's fun. Yeah, your real life is going to be dangerous for you, but the sad part about that is if you try to transport that real life to other countries, you'll tend to run into some problems for all intents and purposes. So I'm willing to bet you any money that the way you act in America or in the Western world would be totally different than how you would act in, let's just say, Juarez or uh, Central America or places like that for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is true. Every day could be your last. It's all about how you actually go about it, and it's all about how you actually do it and conduct yourself for all intents and purposes. Because the sad part about that every day might be your last doesn't always apply when you're doing it properly. Um, when you're doing life proper, well, not if you're doing the gangster life properly, it doesn't always apply. Every day can be your last if you're burning bridges in a gang in a criminal life, or if you're living that lifestyle. If you're burning bridges, every day could be your last, yes. But if you do it properly and you're able to work with people and able to say that you have a good working relationship with a lot of people and you don't have any enemies, I'm not counting feminist or Antifa or anybody like that or anti-MGTOWers. I'm talking about in your actual life. If you don't have any enemies criminally, you'll be fine in life. That's simply how a lot of that stuff works. Um, and I gotta give No Sweetheart a wrench too, FYI. But typically a lot of times people forget about this, and typically, how you living, bro? No Sweetheart's a trip. I knew he was gonna ask that question, but yeah, um, it's one of those things where it's one of those things where you got to understand culture. You got to be able to understand what's going on in your life to actually be able to assess things properly and make for a better judgment or a better way of life for all intents and purposes. So you can't be always trying to do stuff that's not conducive to you if if you're trying to actually live a bad life or live a poor life for all intents and purposes. Let's see if I forgot anybody up in here. Okay, No Sweetheart should have a wrench now, and we'll give Blind Assassin a wrench too. So Blind Assassin got a wrench now if he's still in here. Gruda Ghost already had one. Okay, cool. So everybody has a wrench. Okay, cool. So you basically have to be able to, um, yeah, Blind Assassin has one now, and Gruda, No Sweetheart has one now. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where like you basically have to be able to adjust properly and adjust accordingly to actually live a better life or be able to accommodate yourself in life for all intents and purposes. So just because you're gangster one place, that don't mean you're gangster all over the place. Just because you're popular in one place, that don't mean you're going to be popular all over the place. Just because you're a pickup artist in one place, that don't mean you're going to be a pickup artist in another country. It's typically one of those things. That's how it works. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, because something I've noticed about Latin America, it's actually much harder to pick up a woman in Costa Rica than it is to pick up a woman in Colombia. Simply how that works. Um, just like it's harder to pick up a woman in Canada than it is to pick up a woman in America. It is what it is. But yeah, at the end of the day, you always want to do right by yourself and be better. You always want to be a better version of yourself and always better yourself, and always got to be able to make adjustments and know situational awareness. You got to basically know your situational awareness for other countries and your own country. You got to be able to humble yourself and realize when you're stepping over the boundaries and you in other countries, and you got to be able to acknowledge when you're culturally overstepping your boundaries for all intents and purposes, because that gangster stuff is not going to work in a third world country for you too well. Hell, I've seen people in India end up missing that was trying to act gangster, or in jail, or buried in jail some damn where for all intents and purposes, and nobody ever knew they were in jail. Or same thing goes for any other country like Thailand or Singapore, or I've seen people get buried in jail and nobody knows where they are in that country. Hell, the country buried you so hard they don't even know you're in jail. But yeah, it's just stuff like that that you got to take into consideration and realize that maybe it's not the best idea for you to do the stupid shit that you do when you leave the country, and maybe you'll have a better chance of actually doing what you need to do in that country. Let it be business, or if in some cases if you're trying to get a woman, which I highly suggest against for all intents and purposes, unless you're going to keep her there. But if you're going to do business in those countries, you got to be able to be respectful to those countries. At the end of the day, meeting a woman in another country is nothing more than a business transaction, because you're basically an ambassador at that point. You're basically an ambassador of your country, representing your country to meet a woman in that country, which makes her her the ambassador of that country that you're going to be talking to, and it's going to be your point person for that country. So at the end of the day, it's all about politics and business when you go to other countries. That's pretty much all it really is. That's the best way I can describe that to you. I would like to thank everybody for coming out and listening and taking the time for being in here a little longer than normal. Everybody have a blessed day. Treat yourselves like milk. Do not but spoil yourselves. Be good to yourselves. Love yourselves, and always improve upon yourselves. And make sure you're always the better version of yourself. Uh, and always keep an open mind. Treat yourselves like milk. Do not but spoil yourselves. Love yous, guys. Be good. Adios, my niggas. Very true, Shinobi One. Very true. Every conversation is a business deal. Every conversation is a business deal in secret. Facts. Facts.